The night our company retreat got snowed in at a mountain lodge in Asheville, I was carrying 2 laptops, a presentation binder, and about 6 months of unresolved irritation toward Cassidy Wren. Then the power went out across the entire 3rd floor, and the lodge manager knocked on every door with the same apologetic smile and the same impossible sentence. Due to the storm and limited available rooms, some guests would need to double up for the night. Cassidy got paired with me. Of course she did, because the universe has a sense of humor, and apparently it studied improv. My name is Holden Marsh. I was 32, a senior account director at a mid-sized marketing consultancy in Charlotte called Meridian Group. Cassidy was our head of brand strategy. On paper, we were supposed to be partners. In practice, we were 2 people who had spent 14 months conducting a very professional, very articulate, completely unresolved argument about how good work actually got made. Cassidy thought I oversold. I thought she overcomplicated. She believed clients needed to be challenged out of their comfort zones. I believed clients needed to feel capable before they could be brave. She said my presentations were polished to the point of being dishonest. I said her strategy decks read like academic papers that had developed opinions about themselves. Our colleagues treated our disagreements like the weather. Inevitable, occasionally dramatic, part of the forecast. The thing was, she was usually right, not completely. Not always in the way she thought she was, but often enough that I'd started revising things quietly after our arguments and telling myself I had arrived at the same conclusion independently. I had not. Not once. Cassidy also noticed things I wished she wouldn't. If I was nervous before a big pitch, she would say, without looking up from her laptop, "You're doing the thing with your jacket again." I had not known there was a thing with my jacket. Now I couldn't stop doing it. If I rushed through a section of a presentation because I wasn't fully sold on it myself, she'd catch me in the hallway afterward and say, "Floor 3 slides, you don't believe them." She was never wrong about that either. The retreat in Asheville was supposed to be a team-building weekend. 20 people from Meridian, a rented lodge in the Blue Ridge Mountains, 2 days of strategy sessions, and enforced bonhomie before the Kellner following week. Kellner was a regional hotel group trying to position itself against the national chains. Big account. Everyone was performing confidence they mostly didn't have. By the 2nd evening, the storm that had looked decorative on the drive up had turned genuinely hostile. The kind of snow that doesn't ask permission. By 9 o'clock, the roads out of Asheville were closed. 3 of our colleagues had pulled the last single occupancy rooms, and the lodge manager was going door to door with his apologetic expression and his impossible news. I opened my door and found Cassidy standing in the hallway, already holding a pillow and her laptop bag, looking less like a woman who had been displaced and more like a woman waiting to see if I was going to make this harder than it needed to be. "Don't," she said. "I haven't said anything. You were about to say something unhelpful. I was going to say come in." She studied me for 1 beat too long. Then she walked in. The room had 1 queen bed, a small sofa near the window that looked like it had philosophical objections to being slept on, and a view of the mountain that would have been beautiful if the mountain weren't currently trying to bury us. Cassidy set her things down on the far side of the room with the efficiency of someone establishing a border. "I'll take the sofas," I said. "You're taller. It'll bother you more. That's generous of you. It's practical. I'd like you functional for the Kellner prep tomorrow morning." She pulled out her laptop and sat at the small desk by the window without further ceremony. I sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, the snow kept coming. The lodge had its own generator, but it was doing something uncertain with the heat, and the room had that particular cold that comes in under doors and around windows, no matter how well sealed they look. For about 15 minutes, we worked in silence. It was the most comfortable we'd been around each other in months, which I found disturbing. Then Cassidy said, without looking up, "Slide 9 is wrong. We're not doing this tonight. We're snowed in. What else are you going to do? Sleep. Like a person. Slide 9 says the Kellner brand promise is about comfort. It isn't." I looked up from my laptop. "What is it about?" "Belonging." She turned toward me slightly. "People don't stay at an independent hotel because they want to be comfortable. They stay because they want to feel like they found something the algorithm didn't hand them. The discovery is the product. Comfort is just the floor." I didn't answer immediately. Not because she was wrong. Because she was right and I'd been trying to articulate that exact thing for 3 days and hadn't found the language yet. Belonging, I said. Unless you have a better word. No, I said. That's the word. She looked back at her screen. Something passed across her face. Not satisfaction exactly. More like relief that I hadn't argued. I pulled up slide 9 and started rewriting it. An hour later, the generator made a decision, and the heat dropped another 5 degrees. Cassidy had moved from the desk to the floor near the heating vent with a blanket from the closet. I had made the logical error of not claiming that blanket first, and was now sitting on the sofa, pretending I didn't notice the cold. There's another blanket on the top shelf, she said, without looking at me. I'm fine. Your teeth are doing something. They're not chattering. I didn't say chattering. I got the blanket. When I sat back down, she glanced over from the floor. The lamp was on low. The storm had made the window into a white wall. The lodge had gone quiet around us in the way that only happens when weather makes a place feel cut off from everything. Can I ask you something? I said. She set her laptop aside. You just did. A real question. Cassidy looked at me with that particular expression she used when she was deciding whether the conversation was worth the energy. Go ahead. Why do you argue so hard in rooms where it doesn't matter? She tilted her head. What does that mean? Last Thursday, I said. Internal review. Tom had already made up his mind about the Kellner timeline. You knew that. Everyone knew that. But you still spent 20 minutes telling him why his preferred structure would cap our strategic ceiling, because it will. He's not going to change it. That doesn't make me wrong. No, I said. It makes you inefficient. You already knew the outcome. You fought anyway. Cassidy was quiet for a moment. The wind pressed against the window. I fight because I'd rather be on record than comfortable, she said. If the account underperforms because we capped our own ambition, I want there to be a clear moment in the archive where someone said so. That's not strategy. That's documentation. Sometimes documentation is the only power you have in a room. That landed somewhere unexpected. I looked at her. The lamp made everything look less like an office and more like a real conversation. Does it bother you? I asked. That they don't usually listen? Her expression shifted. Not defensively, honestly. Less than it used to. Why? She looked at the window for a moment. When she looked back, something in her face had changed just slightly. Less armor in it. Because there are people in the room who hear it even if they don't say so. The air in the room did something I didn't have a name for. Like who? I said. My voice came out quieter than I'd intended. Cassidy held my gaze. Don't make me say that out loud. Outside, the wind hit the lodge hard enough to make the window rattle. We both looked at it. When I looked back at her, she was still watching me with an expression I had convinced myself, for 14 months, was professional appraisal. I was becoming less certain about that. She looked down at her laptop. Get some sleep, Holden. Kellner's at 8. She said my name like she'd been saving it for the right sentence. I didn't sleep well. The sofa had its own opinions about geometry, and I woke up twice to the sound of the storm reorienting itself. Each time I looked toward the desk, the lamp was off and the room was still. By 6:30, the snow had stopped. By 7, the road crews were moving. By 7:50, I was in the lodge's small conference room with cold coffee and the revised slide deck, and too many thoughts about a conversation that had probably meant nothing. Cassidy walked in at 7:59. She looked like someone who had slept better than me and was thoughtful enough not to mention it. She set her coffee down, glanced at the screen, and said, You changed slide 9. I told you I would. You told me it was a good word. Not the same thing. I changed it. She sat down across from me. The rest of the deck is stronger for it. That was as close to a compliment as Cassidy gave before 9 in the morning. I noted it and said nothing. The rest of the team filtered in over the next 10 minutes. Our managing director, Tom, arrived last, looked at the revised deck on the conference screen, and said, Who changed the brand promise framing? We did, I said. Tom looked from me to Cassidy. Together? Last night, Cassidy said. The storm gave us time. Tom nodded slowly. It's better. Cassidy and I did not look at each other. That was how I knew we both noticed. The day passed in the way retreat days do when there's real work underneath the team building. The snow on the ground made the walk between the lodge buildings feel like the kind of forced proximity that turns colleagues into either closer friends or confirmed enemies. By the afternoon session, I was running on bad coffee and the specific alertness that comes from trying not to appear to watch someone across a conference table. Cassidy noticed. Of course she did. When the afternoon session broke, she appeared beside me at the coffee station with the quiet efficiency of a person who had planned the approach. "You're doing the jacket thing," she said. "I'm not nervous." "I didn't say nervous." "What did you say?" She picked up her coffee. "I said you're doing the thing. What you're nervous about is your own interpretation." I looked at her. "That is an extremely complicated way to avoid answering a question. I learned from watching you present." I laughed. It came out surprised, which was the honest version. She almost smiled. Almost. Then Tom appeared behind her, and the professional distance snapped back into place like a reflex. "Good session this afternoon," Tom said, looking between us with the mild curiosity of a man who sensed something he couldn't name. "Thank you," Cassidy said. "Kellner's going to be close," Tom said. "3 agencies. I want us walking in Monday with the cleanest story we've got." "We'll have it," I said. Tom nodded and moved on. Cassidy watched him go. Then she looked at me sideways. "Co-lead on the Kellner pitch Monday," she said. "Not you support? Not me support. Was that ever the plan?" "Ask Tom." I looked at her. "What does that mean?" She picked up her coffee and walked toward the window. I followed. Outside, the mountains sat still under the melting snow, turning the late afternoon light into something gold and ordinary and precise. The kind of view people drive 4 hours to see and then take a photo of instead of looking at. "Tom restructured the pitch assignments last week," Cassidy said. "You lead. I support." "He didn't tell me that. He wouldn't." She turned to look at me. "You don't notice the organizational decisions that benefit you because you don't have to." That was said without heat, which made it worse. "I'll fix it," I said. "You shouldn't have to fix it." "I know, but I will." She looked at me for a moment longer than the conversation required. Then she said, "Why?" I looked out at the mountains. "Because the work is better when you're in it as a full participant and not an asterisk, and because I don't want to win an account by sidelining the person who built half the strategy." Cassidy was quiet. The window reflected both of us back at a slight angle. "That's the most direct thing you've said to me in 14 months, she said. "I'm working on a new approach. I'll believe it when the pitch deck reflects it." I turned to look at her directly. Check slide 9. Something passed through her expression, not quite a smile. Something quieter and more difficult to file away under professional. That night, with the roads clear and the retreat technically over, most of the team drove back to Charlotte. 4 of us stayed to finalize the Kellner materials. In the morning, Cassidy was one of the 4. I was another. We had dinner at the lodge's small restaurant with 2 colleagues and talked about the pitch the whole time, and I was aware for every single minute of it how different the conversations felt from 24 hours earlier, and I could not have explained why to anyone's satisfaction, including my own. After dinner, our 2 colleagues went to bed early. Cassidy and I ended up at the small bar near the fireplace because neither of us was ready to stop working, and the alternative was going back to the rooms alone and pretending to sleep. She ordered bourbon. I ordered the same. The fire did what fires do. "Can I ask you the question I didn't ask last night?" I said. She looked at the fire. "You can try. Do you like working with me?" Actually. Cassidy was quiet long enough that I started preparing to regret the question. Then she said, "I like what the work becomes when we argue about it correctly." "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." "So." She turned to look at me. The firelight did something to her expression. Or maybe the expression was already there and the firelight just made it harder to ignore. "I think you're frustrating in a way I haven't been frustrated by anyone else professionally," she said. "And I think you know exactly why that's not a simple answer." I held her gaze. "I think I do." The fire shifted. A log settled. Someone down the bar ordered something with ice. Cassidy looked at her glass. "I got a call last week," she said. Something in my chest went quiet. "From where?" "Langford and Morse." That landed hard. Langford and Morse wasn't just bigger. It was the agency people in our industry named when they were talking about where they actually wanted to end up. Boston office, national accounts. The kind of creative budget that meant you stopped apologizing to clients for having ambitions. "That's significant," I said. "They want me for strategy director." She turned the glass in her hand. "Boston? When?" "They want an answer by the end of the month." I looked at the fire. How far along are you? Far enough that I'm telling you about it in a mountain lodge bar instead of after I've already signed. I looked at her. That sentence had weight and we both knew it. Why are you telling me? I asked. Cassidy met my eyes. Because I'm tired of the version of this where I don't. The fire popped. Outside the mountain was all dark and cold. I said, you should take it. Her expression changed. Something went through it that I wasn't expecting. I know, she said. I mean it. Langford and Morse would be. I know what it would be, Holden. Her voice was even. Not angry. Careful. What I don't know is what this is. She gestured between us once, briefly, and I've been not knowing for long enough that it started to feel like a decision I'm making by not making it. I set my glass down. What do you want me to say? I asked. Nothing practiced. She looked at me steadily. Not the version where you figure out the right answer and deliver it, the actual one. The fire was between us and the rest of the room. The bar was quiet. Outside was all snow and mountain and dark. I don't want to have figured out that the work is better with you in it, and then watch you go build something better somewhere else, I said. I don't want to still be revising my arguments based on what you would say after you've already left. I don't want to spend the next 6 months noticing the jacket thing with no one to tell me about it. I stopped, but I also don't want to be the reason you turned down Langford and Morse. She was quiet for a long moment. That's honest, she said. You asked for it. I did. She looked at the fire. And I don't know what to do with it. You don't have to know tonight. I know. She looked back at me. That's almost worse. We sat there a little longer. At some point the bar got quieter and the fire got lower, and I was aware of a version of the next hour in which one of us leaned closer, and a version in which we both went to bed with nothing said, and I could not tell you which version I wanted more. Only that both felt like different kinds of loss. Cassidy set her glass down. I'm going to get some sleep. She paused. The Kellner pitched matters. I want to be good for it. So do I. She stood. Then, before she walked away, she looked at me with an expression that didn't belong in the professional category I'd been filing things in all year. Don't overthink tonight, she said. That's like telling me not to breathe. Then breathe quietly. And she left. The Kellner pitch was Monday morning. Downtown Charlotte, their regional headquarters, a conference room with a view of the city that suggested they wanted you to feel the scale of what you were being asked to help protect. I pulled Tom aside before the clients arrived. The pitch assignments, I said. Co-lead. Cassidy and I. He looked at me carefully. That's not how I structured it. It's how it should be structured. She built the strategic core. I'm not presenting that as my infrastructure. Tom was quiet for a moment. Does she know you're doing this? She knew before I did. He nodded once, slowly. Don't make it a thing in the room. It'll only be a thing if you try to take it back. He didn't take it back. Kellner had 5 people in the room. Their CMO, a woman named Patricia Ellison, who asked questions with the precision of someone who had been lied to by agencies before and found it clarifying. Their CFO, 2 VP-level brand leads. And their CEO, Douglas Fenn, who sat at the head of the table with the stillness of a man who already knew what he thought and was waiting to be surprised. I opened. Cassidy built the architecture. I translated it into commercial terms. She caught the places where the room had a question it hadn't asked yet and answered it before it surfaced. We moved with the kind of timing that only looks easy when it isn't. We got to the brand promise section. Belonging. Patricia Ellison leaned forward. That's the first word today that doesn't sound like it came out of a hospitality industry template. Cassidy's eyes met mine across the table. I didn't react. The room changed after that. The questions got harder and more specific, which in a pitch means you're winning. Douglas Fenn asked about market differentiation with the kind of directness that makes junior strategists panic and senior ones wake up. I handled the financial positioning. Cassidy built out the brand architecture response. She caught something in the CFO's expression before he said anything, addressed it, and moved on so cleanly he looked mildly surprised. Then Richard, our firm's managing partner who had come along to observe, did something I had been half expecting. Of course, he said, near the end, Holden will be your primary point of contact through implementation. Cassidy will be providing strategic oversight on a consultative basis. Consultative. Cassidy's expression didn't move, mine did. Actually, I said. Richard looked at me. This account is co-led. Cassidy isn't consulting on a strategy she architected. That's not the arrangement you'd be entering with us. I looked at Douglas Fenn directly. If you bring on Meridian, you get both of us in the room. She tells you when the work is starting to go generic. I tell you how to sell what makes it worth buying. That's how today worked. That's how the account works. Silence. Patricia Ellison looked at Cassidy. Is that accurate? Cassidy said calmly, to the word. Douglas Fenn tapped his pen once on the table. Good. That was the first moment you sounded like a team instead of a presentation. Richard went quiet after that, which required visible effort. We got the call at 4:15 that afternoon. Kellner was ours. I was in the small kitchen near the copy room when it came through. Cassidy walked in 30 seconds after I'd read the email, phone in hand, reading the same message. She looked up. I looked up. We got it, she said. We did. She leaned against the counter. The kitchen was small and bad at holding significance. There was someone's leftover lunch in the microwave and a handwritten note on the coffee maker about descaling it. You corrected the room again, she said. I told the truth about the account structure. Same thing. She looked at me. You didn't have to do that. I know. Richard is going to be insufferable about this. Richard was already insufferable. This just gives him a new direction. That got a real laugh from her. Short, private. The kind that sounds different from the professional one. Her phone lit up on the counter. The name on the screen, Langford and Morse. We both saw it. She looked at it. Then at me. The kitchen was very small. You should answer, I said. Her jaw tightened slightly. I know. They'll have heard something. They keep tabs. Holden, you stop being reasonable for 30 seconds. I stopped. She looked at her phone. The call rang through to voicemail. She picked the phone up and looked at it for a moment. I need the weekend, she said. Not to me. To herself, maybe. To the decision she'd been postponing. Take it. She looked up. And then you make the call that makes sense for your career and your life. Not the one that feels convenient tonight. She studied me. You're very good at making the unselfish sentence sound simple. It doesn't feel simple. Then stop making it sound that way. Her eyes held mine for a long moment. The copy machine down the hall did something mechanical and indifferent. What do you actually want, she said. Not the version designed to be fair. The one underneath it. I leaned back against the counter. I want you to stay. I want to keep arguing about strategy in rooms where both of us know the other person is right and won't say so. I want to find out what happens when we stop pretending the friction is the whole story. I kept my eyes on hers. But if you go to Boston and build something that matters, I don't want you looking back at this kitchen and thinking you made the small choice because I asked you to. The fluorescent light above us buzzed once. Cassidy looked down at her phone, then back at me. I hate that you're both the best argument for staying and the best argument for making sure I'm not staying for the wrong reasons. I know. That's an impossible position to put someone in. I know that too. She pushed off the counter and picked up her phone. I'm going home. I need to think without this building in it. She stopped at the doorway. Thank you for the room, for Kellner, for slide 9. Then she left. The weekend was the kind that feels longer than it is. I ran too many miles both mornings and rewrote 0 slides and checked my phone with the frequency of someone who had not admitted to themselves what they were checking for. On Sunday evening, Cassidy sent me a single message. I made the call. That was all it said. Monday morning, she walked into the Meridian office at 8:50, set her bag down at her desk, poured her coffee and came to find me by 9. I turned down Langford and Morse, she said. I was quiet. Not because of the kitchen, she said. Not entirely. She set her coffee down. Because Kellner is the most interesting brand problem I've worked on in 3 years, and I want to see what it becomes. Because the strategy I built here has a foundation I'm not done with yet. And because, she paused. Look directly at me. I'd rather deal with a complicated real thing than a clean hypothetical one. That sounds like you're calling me complicated. You are. So am I. That's not a complaint. I looked at her for a moment. The office around us was starting to fill. People arriving, coffee brewing, the ordinary morning traffic of a consulting firm that didn't know it had just become a different kind of place for me. Have dinner with me, I said. Not a working dinner. She considered it. Define not working. No laptops, no decks, no slide feedback. That sounds extremely inefficient. Cassidy, Thursday, she said. After the Kellner, kickoff, Thursday. She picked up her coffee, took 2 steps, then turned back. Holden, yeah, slide 9 was right. Don't let anyone soften it in implementation. I won't. She nodded once, like a decision had been confirmed, and walked to her desk. Dinner on Thursday was Italian, near South End, the kind of place with good wine and lighting that suggested no one needed to be anywhere else. We talked about Kellner for maybe the first 20 minutes, because that was apparently the version of ourselves we defaulted to, without a blizzard, to slow us down. Then Cassidy set her fork down and said, "We said no work. You brought up the positioning framework. You asked about the Q2 timeline. That was an innocent question. Nothing you ask is innocent." I looked at her across the table. Noted. She smiled. Fully this time. Not almost. Not nearly. Not in the vicinity of. Just straight at me with the guard down. And it was so different from fortfeins of professional approximations that I had to look away for a second. "What?" she said. "Nothing." I looked back. "You just don't do that very often." "Do what?" "Smile like you've stopped calculating." She tilted her head slightly. "Maybe I have. For how long? Tonight, probably. Ask me again Thursday. This is Thursday. Next Thursday." She picked up her wine. "I'm a long-term investment, Holden. Manage your expectations accordingly." I raised my glass. She raised hers. "To slide 9, I said." She laughed. "To belonging." We drank. The next year did not follow a script. Things that are real rarely do. There were weeks where the Kellner account consumed everything, and Cassidy and I were colleagues in every practical sense. And the dinner felt like something that had happened in a different altitude. There were arguments in conference rooms that were genuinely about the work and not about us, and arguments that were about the work and absolutely about us, and we did not always know the difference in real time. But there were also Tuesday evenings where she'd text me a single line about a campaign she was building, and I knew exactly which part of it was bothering her before she said so. There were mornings when she'd come into a pitch, having read something I'd missed, and slide her notes across the table, the way she used to slide that protein bar, without comment, without ceremony, because she had decided I was worth the information. Richard eventually stopped making structural decisions about account leadership without discussing them with Cassidy first. This was not because he became enlightened. It was because she made 2 comments in 2 separate partner meetings that made the cost of ignoring her visible enough that even Richard could see it. I was not present for either of those meetings. That was not the point. Kellner renewed at 14 months. The CMO, Patricia Ellison, specifically requested that both of us be on the renewal presentation. She said in the email to Tom that she had never seen an agency team argue in front of a client in a way that made her trust them more. We took that as professional praise and privately as something else. 18 months after the Asheville retreat, Cassidy and I went back to the same lodge. Not for a company retreat, for a weekend in January, because she had said once that she wanted to see the mountains when the snow was actually beautiful instead of catastrophic, and I had said I knew the place. On the second night, the power didn't go out. The heat worked perfectly. The roads were clear. We had a room with 2 chairs by the window, and a view of the ridgeline going dark against the evening sky. We sat in those chairs with books we weren't reading and wine we were, and at some point the quiet became the kind that only happens between people who have stopped performing for each other. Cassidy put her book down. "Do you remember what I said?" she said. "In the hallway, when the lodge manager told us we'd have to share, you said, 'Don't.' Before that, you hadn't said anything before that. I was thinking it very loudly." I looked at her. The window behind her had gone full dark. The ridgeline was gone. Just the glass and the reflection of the room and the 2 of us in it. "What were you thinking?" I said. She looked at me with the expression I had spent 14 months misidentifying. "That if they paired me with anyone else, I was going to be annoyed about it," she said. "And that being paired with you was going to be complicated in a completely different way." "And was it?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Yes," she said. "The best kind. Outside, the mountain was dark and still and not going anywhere. The kind of permanence that makes a room feel exactly the right size." I reached over and took her hand. She didn't pull it back. She also didn't say anything. She just turned her palm up slightly, like an acknowledgement, and went back to not reading her book. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was the kind of moment people spend years driving toward without knowing what to call it when they arrive. Some things don't announce themselves, they just settle into the room and stay.